It's time to chill out and get ready for a mediocre Q&A live stream. If you're old enough, grab yourself your favorite adult beverage, and if you're not, stick with apple juice. Put your feet up and relax. If you have any questions, feel free to ask them in the chat. And now let's cue up the intro music. What is up, everybody? Welcome to the HVACR videos live stream. So it's been a minute, I think. I don't remember. How long has it been since I've done a stream? I think it's been a minute. Things have been crazy. You know, I had to, unfortunately, we recently had to let a technician go, and we were already short-staffed, but it had to happen, and, you know, life happens, right? So we are massively short-staffed now, right? So we've since hired 2 apprentices, which is, they're doing great, by the way. It's really awesome to hire people that are interested, you know, and want to learn and stuff. So that's really cool. It is kind of fun. If you guys have never been, or never had an apprentice training underneath you, it's really cool to be able to, at least for me, I get gratification by answering questions and helping them. You know, it is kind of a cool thing to be able to teach someone, you know. But so yeah, things have been crazy because at work, because we've been just so short staffed, and it's been hard to, you know, focus on the streams, whether it be the HVAC overtime show or whether it be this stream. It's been a little difficult, but you know, that's life. I've always said that these streams and these videos, you know, should, you know, they'll be on a schedule, work permitting, basically, right? So as long as work happens, so it is what it is. But yeah, that's why things have been kind of like, you know, not so regular. You know, it's interesting because when I started, and this is so spectrum, ADHD, whatever you want to call it, related, but like I focus so hard on these live streams and these videos for so long, I'm exhausted. Like I just, you know, and you know, the crazy thing is when I started putting videos out originally, for like the first year of my channel, I did 3 videos a week, just boom, 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 knocking them out. I do 2 videos a week now, most of the time. And I don't even know how I do 2 videos. There's no way I could possibly do 3 videos a week. That was exhausting. But, you know, I try to just share this knowledge, you know, the same satisfaction I get from, you know, training an apprentice. You know, when I get an email from someone and they say that something that I said in my video or something like that helped them, like, that's really cool. It is really nice to get that feedback. I encourage you guys, if you guys watch other social media creators, you know, the interesting thing is I'm really bad at this. I would say 90% of the stuff I watch on my TV when I'm sitting down on the couch is YouTube. I literally watch other creators all the time. And here I appreciate when people give me feedback, you know, negative or positive, like I always appreciate it. I never leave feedback for anybody else on their own YouTube videos. So if you guys watch any content, I encourage you to leave feedback, because I even forget to do it, but it's like, it does, you know, help. Even if it's just I really appreciate your videos, leave it with your creators that you like, you know, share it with everybody else. I'm not saying to do it to me, because, you know, I get enough of that, but, you know, share it with other creators, because it'd be really cool. You know, it's nice to see that stuff as a creator, I should say. Right. Let's see what else we got going on in the chat. Got a couple things I want to talk about as usual, and then we'll get to all kinds of things. Funny thing, I actually successfully bought a 20-pound cylinder of 454B today. It only took me having to spend a ridiculous amount of money buying 3 package units to be able to buy a drum. Nobody would sell me a drum unless I bought equipment from them. And even then, most people don't have it. This whole drama that we're going through. And I told them when I bought the 3 package units, I was like, I need 3 drums of 454, because they were 454A package units. And they were like, sure, no problem. And then when it came down to it, they're like, we can only give you 1 drum. So at least I got 1 drum. So that'll get me 1 repair, maybe. It's kind of crazy, though. Have you guys been seeing it? Or are you guys seeing this shortage just like everybody else out in the chat? I'm kind of curious. Let's see. Welcome to the stream. Yeah. All right. Let's see what else we got going on in here. YouTube is the way, says Lester Holt. Right on. And what was it? What was your comment earlier? I saw a comment that made me laugh earlier, Lester. Where's it at? I don't know if I can find it. Yeah, it's too far up there. Too far up in the chat, but that was pretty funny. All right. Jason Johnson says he was doing preventative maintenance on a 5 centrifugal chillers today. That's crazy. Those things sound like big units, you know? Let's see. Are A2L refrigerants safe for huffing? That's a good question, man. I just don't think so, you know? Okay, reading through the chat right now. You had a heat pump that was short. It's factory charge. That doesn't surprise me. So, oh, eating condensate tablets. That's right. Lester Holt said something about eating condensate tablets. That made me laugh. I certainly know some techs that would probably do that. Not anybody that works at my company, but some other techs that I see out in the field. Let's see what else we got going on here. Right on. Okay, so it's funny. I can't even say, like, here's the questions. There's so many questions because I've missed so many live streams. I'm just going to pick some of these questions and go through it. But before I get into that, I wanted to talk about something. So for me, I'm sharing this with you because I have since started to really pay attention to the fact that a lot of us that watch these videos together, right? So I happen to be the host of these ones, but I watch everybody else's stuff and I watch content all the time. And I tend to notice trends, and I tend to notice that we're all very similar, even in people's comments and, you know, from the chat right now and from the YouTube comments and emails. Like, I get the vibe that a lot of people share characteristics of myself, right? Whether it be the way we hyper focus, the way that we obsess about things, the way that we stress about things, you know, all this different stuff. And I firmly believe that a good majority of us are somewhere on the spectrum or severe ADHD kind of a thing. And it is what it is. I feel like there's more of us out there than we even realize, right? But with that being said, Brian Sanders, you totally distracted me from my point there. So I'm going to try to focus on my rant. See, Brian Sanders right now is probably laughing his ass off because he put a comment in here that totally distracted me. I read it and then it just like, what the? Okay, that totally made me change my train of thought here. So I'm going to get back to my point. Brian probably feels very successful at this moment because he totally distracted me. So anyways, a lot of us are very similar. A lot of us, in my opinion, have some of the same issues, tendencies, and struggles. And that's why I share the stuff I share. I'm talking to myself when I make a video and I'm explaining something. I'm talking to myself before I knew how to work on whatever I'm talking about, right? So I'm talking to myself in a way that, like, if I was talking to myself 20 years ago, that my 20-year-old self would understand it, because my brain works differently than other people's, right? So the reason why I share these tips is that I know that a lot of us are similar. So I want to talk about something controversial, whatever it may be. But, you know, there's a common trend on Facebook where people say that this trade causes divorces. It's the root of most divorces. HVAC people can't stay married. It's not a good business to be in if you have a family. And while some of those things might be true, in my opinion, a good majority of the time, the issue is the person. It's not the business, okay? This business will take your time as long as you let it take your time, right? And obviously, we have to do on-call rotations and stuff like that. But I mean, trust me when I say don't let it consume you like it's consumed me. Okay. Luckily, I have a good partner. My wife is amazing, and we have very good communication. She understands that I have issues and it's hard for me to let go of things. And, you know, we could be in a family function and I get an email and I'm done. I cannot focus at the family function anymore because I read that one email and all I can think about is that email, and I will not let it go. Like, it just ruins me. And it's not that I intentionally do it. It's just something that I do. And, you know, communication for us is what works. I'm not saying I'm perfect, because I've got lots of flaws, and, you know, nobody's perfect. But with that being said, communication is what works for us. So don't let this trade break you, and don't blame the trade for your own issues, because if you blame the trade and say the trade is what caused your divorce, well, when you move on to the next thing, you're just going to have the same issues, because it's the way that you focus on things, in my opinion. Okay. So just communicate with your partner, let them know what you're going through. You know, I think it's more important these days for people to talk, and it really will help. Now, just because you tell someone something, you know, whatever, they may not do it, or who knows, but just communicate. That's the biggest thing. I'm going to tell you one last thing, then I'll go off on another subject and we'll get back into the technical talk. But I can remember, years and years and years ago, I can remember talking to my grandfather and going to tell him that I was proud of myself, okay, because I decided to get help and I went and saw a therapist. I'm talking 15, 20 years ago, okay? My grandfather and I used to sit down and have discussions like once every couple of weeks, and we would always tell each other about what was going on. It was a cool relationship we had. It was one of the most respected people in my lives, great person. You know, just the interesting thing is that he didn't have to be my grandfather. He was a step grandfather, but he was the closest grandfather I had. Like, it was amazing. Anyways, great person. The interesting thing was that when I told him that I went to see a therapist, he looked at me and he said, "Why would you ever talk to someone about that?" Like, and it just blew my mind that my grandfather said that. Just blew my mind. But the reason why I brought that up is we tend to think that we don't need to talk about certain things. But make sure you're talking to your spouse, so that way, or your partner or whoever, so that way they understand what you're going through with this trade, because it's really easy to blame this trade for it ruining things. And it's really not that. It's the way, in my opinion, that we hyper focus on things. Okay. So that's my rant. I'm going to stop on that. Then we'll get to the HVAC talk. There's my thing. You guys want to talk more about it, shoot me an email, hvacrvideos@gmail.com. Okay. Let's get to a couple things on my list of stuff to talk about here. So Mother's Day weekend, I was on call, had a bunch of service calls this weekend. Friday night, I was out working till 11:30. I released a video on Sunday, 11:30, somewhere in there. I released a video on Sunday. That was Friday's video. Okay. I had some other videos that I was maybe going to release on Sunday, but Friday's video was really easy to edit. It was quick and it was fresh on the mind. So it was easy. Throw it out there. Then I did a couple ice machine calls. Excuse me. Random, just yawning out of nowhere. I did a couple ice machine calls this weekend. What else? There was another one too. I had an air conditioning call this weekend. Most of it was because we got a freak heat wave out of the not normal temperatures, right? And we had our first 100-degree weekend, over 100-degree weekend of 2025. It hit about 105 at my house, and the roofs that I was working on was about 108, 109, somewhere in there. So it was a nice warm weekend, and everybody got to realize all the stuff that wasn't working. Ice machine calls were through the roof, and majority of the time it was just because they were it was hot outside and they weren't producing as much capacity. Basically, remember that when we go into this season, ice machines have a rated production, and when it says a 1,600 pound machine, that is not 1,600 pounds at 110 degree ambient. It's typically 1,600 pounds at like 75, 80 degree ambient. So once it goes up, the capacity goes down. Same thing with, remember, air conditioning, refrigeration, the refrigeration cycle in general. The system components are typically designed for a certain operating envelope, temperature envelope, right? Indoor conditions, outdoor conditions, you can plot it on a graph and you could see the arc at which the capacity is going to drop as the temperature goes up. And that's typical. So the same principle happens with air conditioning, refrigeration, ice machines. It's all going to have its point at which, it falls off the map, essentially. And that's what I had. I had a bunch of those calls this weekend. One of my techs went and ran another one of those calls today, and seemed like it was the same thing. Customer just didn't understand that the machine wasn't sized right, All right, let's see what else we got going on in the chat real quick. Lester Holt, you're killing me with these comments. He says he upsold his mom a hard start kit for Mother's Day. That's funny. Jason Johnson says 104 degrees tomorrow and Wednesday. Yeah, the interesting thing is we hit 100, broke 100 degree, record-breaking stuff for May. And then this week we're back to normal, and it's like upper 70s, and it's supposed to possibly rain this weekend. So I'm going to kill us with yawns right now. Brian Sanders says, last call of the day today was for a cold rail. Customer said wasn't holding temp. Head pressure was 405 PSI, condenser completely plugged. So, the interesting thing, Brian Sanders, is that you won't see it on a cold rail unit, but we will regularly see 400 PSI system pressures all the way up to like 415 when we're dealing with 404A in our summertime ambient temperatures, because we will hit 115 on the roof in a regular, on a regular basis. And so, yeah, the 404A literally goes to as far as the systems because they're not designed for those ambient conditions. So we basically will top out and start tripping pressure controls basically because the systems are operating outside their operating envelopes. Again, like I said, there's a operating envelope of this equipment. The temperatures affect the pressures, right? Because we all know temperature and pressure have a direct relationship when it's concerning refrigerants. So, any refrigerant essentially. Let's see. Caden Davis. Have I heard of Mr. Fat Cheeto? Yeah, a social media guy. I've seen some of his stuff. Yeah. All right. Reading through the chat right here. It says, you are a retired New York City fitter here. Amazing how things have changed since you started back in 1985. Very interesting, man. Yeah. So my dad started around the same time, started his business in 91-ish. I grew up second generation working with him. And then him and I joined, became partners and, now run the business together. But yeah, very different. He hasn't had a tool belt on, like out working in the field, besides just like helping us with certain little things in probably 20 years. And basically, because he's been out of the trade so long, it's completely left him behind as far as knowledge and stuff. And I'm sure you can agree, the gentleman that made that comment, that in 1985, things were very different because, I mean, to be fair and not to be rude to anybody, because I too am a product of this, we didn't really understand how to work on the systems very well, right? But the equipment was very forgiving, and it was really easy to just kind of figure things out, right? And just kind of make it work, because back in the day, the equipment was so forgiving. We had like 6 to 8 SEER air conditioning equipment. Most of it was fixed orifice metering devices. You did have expansion valves too, but a good majority of the light commercial package units were fixed orifice capillary tubes. And, it didn't have computer boards. And so it didn't have to work perfect. It worked pretty good, and customer was happy, right? Everything was oversized a good majority of the time. And that's just how things worked. But as the efficiencies went up, as the technology hit the market, it became more of a niche trade that we really, really need to understand and have to, you know, really know the minute details of how this equipment works to be able to troubleshoot it. It's not as easy as making it work like I too did back in the day, right? It's very interesting. That's actually how my videos started in general, was by wanting to do better, right? And I learned everything from my dad, but he was a beer can cold technician. But I'm not blaming him. I'm not saying there was anything wrong, because that's how things were, right? Everybody was that way. And I was trained that way. I was trained that when I was working on a carrier package unit, again, fixed orifice metering device, I was trained that in order to charge it with refrigerant, if you weren't weighing in the charge, what we did was we added refrigerant to the system. Mind you, I was taught not to pull a vacuum either. I was taught to purge a system. You take off the high side hose, you purge it through on the low side until it comes out, and then boom, put it on and you were good to go. Now that wasn't right. That was not right. But that's just how things, a good majority of the people did it back then. Okay. And I realized, like, hey, I started going to school and I'm like, this isn't right. I wanted to do better. I learned the right ways to do things. It was a struggle, you know, and the trade is definitely different. And the crazy thing is that the trade is not as forgiving, in my opinion, as it used to be. I made a lot of mistakes and I learned on a lot of customers' equipment. Nowadays, the customers don't really tolerate that. They want a first-time fix, no callbacks. They want it done, you know, and they're quick to move on to the next contractor, really quick. So you got to be thorough. You got to know how to do things, and you got to figure it out. You got to build a working relationship with your customer. So yeah, this whole trade, technology and the customers are completely different now. Definitely a trip. All right, let's see what we got going on in the chat. Okay. Yep, exactly. I'm reading through the chat, seeing what I'm missing. I already answered that one. Yep. Heatcraft is out of Georgia. Parts made elsewhere, though. Yeah, Heatcraft sources their parts from all around the world. I don't know what that question is related to. So, oh, okay. So Franklin says, you wonder if the tariffs are going to affect the prices on parts for restaurant equipment, such as refrigeration. Oh, yes, it is. Hands down, it is going to affect it, because even if they're not, you know, even if they are making the components in the United States, a lot of the times the components are coming from elsewhere in the world, because we don't have every single, you know, possible construction material to make these, you know, products that we use in our system, right? We don't have all the metals. We don't have everything here anymore. So yeah, they get a lot of stuff from outsourcing it, right? So hopefully we get through this. I definitely suspect that there's going to be some rocky times coming. This economy is definitely interesting. I'm starting to see it reflected in the restaurants. I was talking to one of my busiest restaurants today, and I asked them how the weekend went, and they were about $15,000 shy their total sales of their projected numbers, right? So basically last year they hit a certain number, so they always project to hit that number again, and they were $15,000 total in sales shy. I think they sold like $40,000 on Sunday, I think, or something like that. Like, it was crazy for Mother's Day. And they expected to hit like 55 or 60. So, and I heard that from a few other restaurants too. So while people are out there, I think people are starting to tighten things up, because I mean, certainly it's too expensive for me and my family to go out to eat. And, you know, we're trying to conserve too, even though we do still eat out a little bit too much, but we don't really go to restaurants very much anymore. We go to a lot of fast casual if we do. You know, we try to be conservative. If we are going to go out, maybe we're not going to get drinks or something like that, you know? So it's definitely going to be an interesting time for sure. So let's see what else. Reading through the chat right now. Oh, that anyways, I got lost on a tangent when I was saying, well, anyways, no, never mind. My story was done. Do I think the work span of technicians are declining? What do you mean, Mr. Green, by the work span? I don't understand what you mean by that. Oh, Brian Sanders says he got to talk to one of those engineers at United Refrigeration the other day, and he says that he could have talked to that guy for hours. You know what? It is really cool when you get to talk to someone that is much smarter than you, but they can talk to you in a way that doesn't make you feel stupid. you know, and you can just have a genuine conversation with them. It is really cool to talk to those people, right? The engineer type dudes and stuff. On another note, I was actually just having this discussion a while back. I posted something on social media about Neil deGrasse Tyson and how I think I was asking a question on whether or not people would be interested in seeing him, right? Because I have an opportunity to see him. And then I had asked my youngest daughter if she would be interested in seeing him, and she was super excited about it. So I did buy the tickets. This was months ago. Anyways, that's coming up next in June. In the beginning of June, we get to go see Neil deGrasse Tyson. He's just doing some sort of a stadium tour, essentially, at local theater near me, the Fox Theater in Riverside, actually. And so it was really cool. I got some tickets, and my daughter's super stoked to go. But the thing I like about Neil deGrasse Tyson is that he's an astrophysicist. He's one of the smartest people out there when it's concerning the cosmos and things like that. But in general, he's a super brilliant guy, right? But he can talk. When you listen to his discussions and stuff, he can talk in a way that it's like, wow, he makes it make sense. Similar to, in my opinion, you know, talking to an engineer that knows a lot about HVAC that can actually talk to you. Yeah. And then it's like, oh, wow, it's really cool to have those conversations with those people. Let me see. Yeah, man, tech junkie. I was trained old school, man. That was not the right way, but heck yeah, that's how we were taught. So, when the last time I worked on a cap tube HVAC system, Mark Lopez, it's been a while, but I mean, fixed orifice, I still work on fixed orifice it seems like multiple times a week, because a good majority of the carrier package units are still fixed orifice metering devices. They just have multiple actuator metering devices in them, right? So, you know, it's the same thing as working on a cap tube system, right? But it's not a physical capillary tube wound up. No. So, Tech Junkie says that you forgot your Fieldpiece probes at home and had to charge a system by condensing temp over ambient. Worked great. You wasn't concerned on critical charge once you knew it was low. Yeah, but I'd still say that you definitely would need to dial in that refrigerant charge, though. You might be able to get yourself going, and I'm not saying I can't get myself going, but you know, to get it working right. And things to think about is subcooling. You know, how's the subcooling requirement for the system going to change as the temperature changes? Well, as the outdoor ambient temperature goes up, refrigerant pressure goes up, things change, the dynamics of the refrigerant change, right? The density, like so many things change. So, you know, your measured subcooling might be more or less at cooler or warmer temperatures. And the important thing to understand is that condensing temp over ambient might get you in the ballpark, right? You might see a correlation between a properly charged system and condensing temp over ambient, but there's also a lot of room there. For instance, you know, if you have a big enough condenser or you have a system with a receiver, your head pressure isn't necessarily, it's going to hit a wall at some point, and it's not going to change much as the refrigerant starts stacking in the receiver or the oversized condenser. You know, and that refrigerant may or may not be required as the load increases on the system. So not having that extra refrigerant, you know, just because you charge that condensing temp over ambient when it's needed, it might lead to a problem, you know. And I get it though. Like, I get what you're saying. Like, sometimes you got to do what you got to do to get it going. I get that. But remember to try to always fall back and follow up on that equipment. So let's get down into the chat right now. How well do I like my Fieldpiece gauges? Are they better than Testo? In my opinion, I like the Fieldpiece gauges over the Testo gauges, okay? Something about the ergonomics, but I've always used Fieldpiece for many, many years. So with that being said, you know, are they perfect for everybody? No. Okay. It's just what I like. So just because I like something doesn't mean that you're going to like it. I like the technology in the Fieldpiece. Back in the day when the Testo and the Fieldpiece had first come out, Fieldpiece had better Bluetooth range. I think it still does, in my opinion. But I have a Testo manifold. I don't know which one I have. I have one. Maybe you guys know. You might see it in my videos. It just sits in my van. I don't use it. It's just my backup manifold, essentially. So just not really a huge fan. All right. Mechanical environments. Testo has the best app for smart probes. Both Fieldpiece and Testo make good products, but you would go Testo all day personally. See, to each their own. I'm not a huge Testo fan. I think that might be Megan from Mechanical Environments, right? I think that, I don't know, you tell me, because typically you're the one I think that interacts on social media, right? Under that name. Anyways, but I could be wrong. Yeah, you know, you like them, that's great. Just not my thing. But I'm not going to go out and say they're horrible because someone else might like them. Same thing with a brand preference with HVAC equipment. So, you know, to each their own. I like Lennox and Carrier. I don't like Trane. I don't like York. But some of you guys probably love York and Trane. It's cool. I'm just not familiar with them, you know, so I'm not as comfortable working on them. Oh, okay, cool. Right on. All right, reading through the chat right now. Okay, let's see. All right, got a couple things I want to talk about. Oh, this is one I get all the time. Someone will always tell me when I touch a Graslin defrost clock or a defrost module that I rotate them from the wrong thing, that you're supposed to use the little clock hand and not the outside dials. I have always used the outside dials, and I think I've even read that somewhere. I don't know where, but I've never noticed a problem. Those clocks don't last as long, and they tend to go bad before turning the dials from the outside is a problem. I really don't see why turning the dials from the outside would be an issue. Because if you ever turn one of them, if you ever turn the little fingers on a brand, or the little hands on a brand new clock, it turns really easily. If you turn it on the outside, it turns really easily. As the clock gets older and it gets gummed up, yeah, if you turn it from the inside, it gets really hard to move. And then if you turn it from the outside, it can you can hear the gears breaking, but I mean, the clock's bad already. So I don't think that's I don't know. I've always turned them from the outside. So Megan, that's right, Megan. Did I say something else? Okay. Oh, there you go. So that's Matt. Okay, so interesting. So that's what I need to know. I never know if it's Megan or Matt, which one is in there, because I see mechanical environments, but now I see Megan in there. That makes more sense. So is it always Matt that's under mechanical environments? And I'm sorry if it is Matt. I apologize, dude, if that is. There you go. Okay, so that makes sense, Megan. Got it. Got it. That's the thing. I just never know who to address when it's there. So I'm glad you guys clarified that. That's cool. That's better to know that way. So then that way I'm not always talking about one person. So, all right, cool. All right, couple more things I want to talk about. Do I encourage my customers to watch my videos? I mean, not really. I try not to ruffle feathers and, you know, make a big scene out of filming my videos. I will say that my customers on a corporate level have found my videos, and, you know, they, one of my corporate customers actually just said, keep them up, you know, just, they can't give me official approval, but they said, keep it up, you know, because lawyers will rip everything apart. So you get what I mean on that. But yeah. All right, cool. Reading through here. All right. Yeah. Spam. I just wouldn't even worry about it. All right. What does closing the pulley on a motor do? That's a great question. This is a really good one. So relating to a video that I did an air balance on, right? Just like a rough, crude air balance on the building. I went to speed up the exhaust fans and I closed down the motor pulley. So right here, we have a brand new motor pulley. You see the V groove. And something to understand is that a motor pulley should not have ripples. It should be a perfect V, okay, on these, a V grooved pulley. Now, hold on. For example, a motor pulley should not look like this. A motor pulley should look like this. See the differences? There's no more V-shaped on this pulley right here, okay? It's got a weird groove to it. And notice this one, you've got a perfect flat V shape. So with that being said, what happens when you close down the pulley? Well, it speeds up the driven pulley. So something to understand is when you have a pulley system, you typically have a motor pulley and you have a driven pulley. Some people may call them a sheave, to each their own, okay? So you have a motor pulley and a driven pulley. As you close this pulley down, the belt makes more contact with this pulley. So let's just say you have a belt and it's going around this pulley. If the pulley's open, the belt may only make contact right here and right here. But as you close the pulley down, the belt makes contact here and here. and thus the belt is being affected more by the speed of the motor. So it turns, and then it turns the driven pulley more. Okay. So as you open this motor pulley, then you in theory would slow down the driven pulley. So that's what I mean by closing down the pulley. Okay. I'm adjusting the surface contact point on the belt with the pulley. That's essentially what we're doing. All right. Hopefully that answered that question. Let's get into the chat right now and see what I'm missing. What's up, Ryan? Ryan Hughesman, or Ryan Hughes. I call him Hughesman. So I always tease Ryan about that because his name is Hughesman, but his name is Ryan Hughes, right? So it's sometimes we say Hughesman, even, and it became like a joke with Bill and Bill actually, essentially. Bill always calls him Hughesman just to mess with him. But what is up, Ryan? Good to see you in here, man. Good to see you in the stream. So, all right. Let's see, Aaron G, you had an RTU today and you wanted to change the Cormax fittings like you learned in my videos. Well, unfortunately, not a single warehouse even knew what it was that you were looking for. Oh, yeah, the Cormax tool for changing the Cormax fittings. Yeah, it's a ridiculously expensive tool. You need to go to like a refrigeration supply house, like a United, or depending on where you're at. I don't know, but United should have them. But it's from JB Industries and it's the Cormax tool. So very expensive though. So yeah, it's essentially changing the diameter of the pulley. Yeah. So interestingly enough, when you look at a pulley, I mean, if you think about them, they're cool, but they're actually inefficient because you're only getting this much work from the pulley, essentially half the pulley or a little bit less than half of the pulley, because that's where the belt's actually making contact. So you're not getting the full capabilities of that motor. But you also get some other things by using a pulley system versus a direct drive motor. It's easier to source motors when it's, basically pulley driven, essentially. Direct driven motors can be a little bit more tricky depending on what the equipment was designed for and different things like that. But all right. Oh, the fitting alone. Shoot, anybody that has JB Industries should be able to find that fitting. So yeah, anybody. All right, cool. Let's get to a couple more things on here. Reading through some questions. Why are pump down systems used? Why not just have a thermostat cycle the compressor on and off? Pump down systems, the primary function is going to be basically to prevent refrigerant migration during the off cycle. If you have refrigerant migration in an off cycle, what you can cause is refrigerant to migrate to certain sections. Then the compressor might start and flood back with the refrigerant. Like the refrigerant all might come back to the compressor on the suction line at the same time if it's stuck in the evaporator. And then what that can do is start to foam up the oil in the compressor, and then the oil would leave the compressor. Now, for a long time, I always thought that the oil migrated, right? But I was incorrect, especially when I was very, very young, because I was taught incorrectly, right? Even from school, I learned the wrong way. So, I always thought that the oil migrated through the system, but it's actually the refrigerant. The refrigerant all the liquid refrigerant will sit in the evaporator sometimes. And then when you start it up, it'll all come back. And then it washes the oil out of the compressor into other places in the system. So one of the main functions of a pump down system is to prevent refrigerant migration during the off cycle. Okay. Back in the day, there was a lot of systems, and I certainly cut my teeth learning systems that only had pressure controls as temperature. So, systems did have things like that before, but we don't use that as much because of problems that we had, essentially, right? Because if we were operating a system off of a pressure control, then there was no solenoid valves. You just shut the system off, and then, refrigerant reacts to temperature. So as the evaporator got warmer, the refrigerant pressure would rise on the suction side, and then it would turn on the pressure control, and then it would run until the pressure got low enough, and it would shut off again, and it would maintain temperature. But we would have more issues back then, right? So anyways, that's the answer to that question. Let's see what else we got going on in the chat. 5-year-old RTU unit low on charge. Where do you look first? I mean, it depends on the system and what type of system. I'm going to start before I even put service gauges on the system, is you're going to pull the caps off. You're going to look to see if there's gaskets in the Schrader ports. And then or in the Schrader caps, and then do a leak search on the Schraders before you even apply your service gauges, then work your way through the system. Then, once I check the Schraders, I'll apply gauges, and then I might even leak check in the general vicinity of where the Schrader fittings are going to be. So that way, when I put the hose on and you get a little bit of spray back while you're applying it, it doesn't, mess up my leak detector. So you might search the general area of where the hoses are going to be connected. Then, start looking for oil contamination, dirt contamination that might be pooling around a refrigerant leak or something like that. And then, start from there. Leak detector for sure is going to save your butt, basically. So, reading through here, what else we got going on? Cool. All right. You have a weird, okay. All right. Chris, how accurate is MeasureQuick CFM airflow measurements? So here's the deal. MeasureQuick is very, very accurate when it comes to a typical residential system. Okay. But where MeasureFlow is going to lose accuracy, and not MeasureQuick's fault, but really a fault of the design of the system, is when you're working on package units, okay? Especially in commercial environments. So MeasureQuick is very, very accurate on residential systems, and it will help you significantly. It's totally worth it. On commercial systems, in my opinion, MeasureQuick is more of a data consolidation tool and puts it in a nice shiny package, okay? Essentially, it puts some cool graphics behind the data and helps you to diagnose. On commercial, you're definitely not using very much of the diagnostic features on MeasureQuick as you can on the residential side. The reason why it's not as accurate on the commercial equipment is because we're not following the installation instructions of MeasureQuick. MeasureQuick has specific instructions on where to put your air probes, where to put your static probes, your pressure probes. And on package units, you don't have a lot of options. A good majority of the time you're up on a roof, the diffusers are, 15 feet below you, and they're suspended in the ceiling 20 feet above the ground. So you can't take your supply air probe and put it on the first supply air diffuser in the duct design or duct system, right? Like MeasureQuick tells you to do. You can't take your return air temperature sensor and put it 3 feet away from the evaporator like MeasureQuick tells you to do, okay? Because you're working on a package unit. So you put that return air probe, in the only spot that you have on that package unit that may be, 6 inches from the evaporator. And, the discharge air probe may be 6 inches from the blower wheel, very turbulent air. So it's not going to be as accurate on package units in no way. Okay. And that's just because we can't use it the way that it was designed, essentially. I'm not going to say it's a flaw in MeasureQuick at all. MeasureQuick has done a great job. I've always been a huge supporter of MeasureQuick. They had a few bumps in the road when they got rid of the screenshots, but that still didn't faze me because I didn't mind supporting them, but they broke, frustrated a lot of people, essentially. But they have since made screenshots available again, and they've actually basically leveled up on MeasureQuick, and it's got some amazing features these days. It has paid and non-paid features, and it's amazing what you get from that app. It's absolutely amazing. So, Jason Johnson says MeasureQuick is useless for what he works on. Exactly. I mean, for me, it consolidates the data into one place and makes it easy for me to see all the metrics and know the numbers, right? But it doesn't troubleshoot at all for me. And, yeah. All right, cool. I'm going to go through my questions here real quick and see if there's anything else. What do I do with all my old equipment? Someone asked me. So when I use a crane and I lift an air conditioner off the roof, or I take an exhaust fan, or I take a compressor, what do I do with them? A good majority of the time they go to the dump or the recycling yard. On the package units, it's part of our agreement from the delivery driver. Part of his fee is that he gets to take the equipment. So he charges us a small fee, and then he takes all the equipment, and then he recycles it. He has a team of guys that work with him. They recover the gas. They're fully EPA certified. Dude's really on it. He breaks it down to the metals. He has all the time and the labor to do so. So we usually let the package units go with him. As far as exhaust fans, those things go in the dumpster. I'm not reusing them. As far as motors and compressors, they pretty much go in the dumpster. Every once in a while, I will cut them up. I have a few in the shop that I still need to cut up from different jobs from last year, some of them actually. And, so if I want to use them as a training aid, I'll cut them up for the guys. But that's it. We just get rid of everything. So, Matt from Mechanical Environment says smart probes are the way to go for all service. You know, I'm using smart probes more and more, Matt. I still use my manifold gauge set when it comes to charging refrigeration systems. I will charge package units with my smart probes, but when I'm working on walk-ins and freezers and remote refrigeration systems, I tend to still use service gauges. Probes, I don't know. They just don't really do it for me when I'm working on that stuff. So to each their own, though, you know, it's all good. Probes are definitely amazing, though. So turns out system is R22 and someone doing, oh, okay, cool. I'm reading someone's comment. You want more cut up compressor videos. Talk about failures and show how it failed. It's a possibility, you know, it's definitely a possibility. Got 2 of them right behind me that I've done videos on and cut them up. I'd like to say that I've gotten pretty good at cutting these things. If you get them in the right spot, the hardest thing about cutting these compressors up is getting your cuts to be straight. Even if you use tape, it's hard to keep them straight. I need that. If you've seen Roman Baugh, who works for HVAC school, he's very active in the social media groups and the VRF groups. I was actually just talking with him in a group chat we have. And he has a really cool compressor cutter for demonstration purposes and for making videos over at HVAC school, because he works at Kalos and HVAC school. So anyways, he's got a giant, basically, what do you want to call it? I don't even know what it is. But anyways, it'll hold a compressor and perfectly, and then it has a saw blade that'll come down and you very carefully cut the case of the compressor so you can inspect them and analyze them without getting a bunch of metal shavings in them. That, you know, when he started making those videos, I was like, dude, I'm done. I'm done using a grinder. Let's just let, you know, the experts do it over here. Because Roman always amazes when he cuts those things open. They're awesome looking inside. Okay, what do you let's see. What do you suggest are the steps for troubleshooting a VFD? Michael Cruz, first off, you need to make sure you have the right instruments and you understand. I am not an expert with VFDs, variable frequency drives, okay? Jason Johnson does pretty well with them. He's in here, and they work on the big boy stuff. I only work on small little VFDs, but for me, it's going to be to fall back on the manufacturer. Check for proper voltage on the inputs. Make sure you've got good tight connections and the right you know, wire was used for communication lines and things like that, and lean on the manufacturer's troubleshooting techniques. They're typically going to ask you to go into the parameters, check certain parameters, look at error codes. Most of the drives that I'm working on are not repairable drives per se. You know, it's not big giant ones like Jason Johnson might work on that you can actually change components in and stuff. My stuff's just the little itty bitty drives. So for the most part, it's just going to be checking voltage, checking parameters, making sure the fans didn't go bad. And that's going to be all the troubleshooting we have on the VFDs that I work on. So let's see. Ryan Hughes says that he uses probes and manifolds, depends on how he feels that day. I'm kind of the same way. You seem to always have an issue getting the probes to connect when you need them. I've gotten pretty good with my probes. I have like a full kit that I use for air, but my probes, pretty much if I'm working on an air conditioner, I'm grabbing the probe bag. But my probe bag works on, I have probes basically for 4 circuits on that, because I work on some of the systems that have 4 compressors or 3 or whatever. So I have the probes for all that. So I've got a full Vito tech pack, the backpack one, that's just for my probes. And it's kind of doesn't have places for all of them. Like I need a bigger bag, but smaller, because that bag's already big enough. Do I find myself working less hard as I become more of an owner operator of my company? Like, do I see myself slowly getting out of the field yet? Aaron G, as I became an owner operator, yeah, I find that the office demands me more and more, and I'm fighting it tooth and nail because I genuinely love fixing things and being out in the field. I do not like running a business. Like, absolutely do not like running a business. So, yeah, I find myself getting pulled into the office more and more. Right now, we've got 2 apprentices. So my mechanic and myself each have an apprentice, and we swap and we use them different things, different jobs, right? So everybody's working with everybody. And so basically having an apprentice riding with me all the time right now, I have no time to be in the office because I've got an apprentice with me. I'm, you know, taking him out to go do service calls. So it's a struggle, to say the least. It is a struggle. Do I have a picture to show of a walk-in freezer door heater power wire on a sliding door? Nope. I never worked on a door heater on a sliding door, my friend. Sorry. I've seen them, but never worked on them. Matt says that his manifold mainly comes out for pressure tests these days. Okay, yeah, I hear that. Doing a tightness test or something like that for sure. I'm going to use a manifold. Yeah. All right. Am I still doing the Apprentice series? Zach. Yeah, I mean, you know, it's funny because I made this video saying it was an Apprentice series video, but in reality, it's how I talk in all my videos. But yeah, I mean, you know, when I get an opportunity, I'll film something. Haven't had much to film. A lot of the stuff we've been doing is cleaning coils and stuff. But yeah, you know, I've been trying to like incorporate more of the Apprentice series stuff just in my normal videos too, and like the way that I'll show people and talk to them. All right, cool. Well, it is time to wrap this one up. I am going to try to get more regular with these things, and you know, no promises, but we're trying to get a little more regular with the overtime show also. On a side note, anybody in the SoCal, specifically the Inland Empire, I'm thinking about doing some sort of a meetup in my local town with local techs. So if anybody is around me, generally I'm in Harupa Valley, Riverside area. So I'm thinking about some of the breweries, whiskey bars, things like that in downtown Riverside. If you guys are local, shoot me an email or a message or a DM or whatever, and let me know if you're local and if you'd be interested in that. I'm trying to kind of gauge feedback on that. Also, you know, as we start to do travels for whatever reasons, I'm going to try to do those a little bit more. And I'm not expecting a bunch of people to show up. You know, when I was in Vegas, I had 2 people show up and we just hung out and talked for like an hour. It was really cool. So I'm not expecting it to be a bunch of people, but Vegas, we did have some problems too. So I suspect there might've been more people that tried to come. There was a huge parking problem with where we did the meetup at. So Mike B says you can fly in. That's funny. You know, Mike B, on another note too, kind of a dream of mine. I don't think this is going to happen, but kind of a dream of mine is to have the West Coast HVACR training symposium out here. Ironically, I remember Brian Orr saying that when he first did the HVAC training symposium in Florida for the first year. I remember him talking about it, and he talked about wanting other people to do them too. But yeah, I've always dreamt of doing that, but like, oh man, I just don't know that I have the time to focus on something like that where you actually do something as cool as that. Let's see, Megan, or I'm sorry, Matt. Sorry, I gotta get past that. I'm gonna start saying Matt when I see mechanical, not Megan. So Matt says you only use the Appion charging tees. The normal brass ones do suck frost. Oh yeah. So I have the Schrader depressors from Appion, and I love those, but I still have a brass charging tee after them, if that makes sense. So is that what you're talking about, or is there another Appion one that I don't know about? Because I use the actual Schrader depressors for like the Cormax fittings, but I use those for my probes. But then I still have this. Aaron G says the grit camp. Yeah, I would like to do a grit camp. That would be cool. But I want to do something. I'd love to do a training thing. See, ironically, before videos, before any of this stuff, I used to be very involved in my local RSCS chapter. And we used to have a very active chapter at the San Bernardino chapter. And we would do big, giant trade shows, essentially, right? Where we would have educational trainers coming in, just like the symposium, but just not on a social media level, essentially. And we would do that. Those were fun, having the training classes and setting it all up and stuff. But I couldn't imagine doing one as big as the symposium. I think for the RSCS ones, like the most people we had was like 40, 50 people. So, oh, interesting. So Matt is saying that they make an Appion charging tee. I don't know if I've seen that. I'll have to look it up. Maybe I haven't. I just don't remember it. But cool. Well, I'm going to wrap this up. No closing music right now because I've realized that there's a problem with my music. So I'm just going to do the outro music. I'm sorry, the intro music, and then we'll be done after that. So I'm going to wrap this up. No dogs tonight either because my dog's at training right now. So it's trying to become a better dog and stop some bad habits. But anyways, I'm going to go ahead and actually, no, I'm not even going to cue up the outro music because I can't even do that. So yeah, that's it. I really appreciate you guys. Shoot me an email if you guys have any questions at hvacrvideos@gmail.com. If I missed anything, shoot it to the email. Hopefully we'll see you guys on the HVAC overtime show, work permitting, this week. Until next time.